Welcome to the SDA Housing Podcast, brought to you by NDIS Property Australia. Before starting this episode, we need to provide a general disclaimer. Information contained in this podcast is general in nature only. It does not take into account the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. You need to consider your financial situation and needs before making any decisions based on the information in this podcast. And you should consider seeking independent and professional advice for your personal circumstances. All right, let's begin.
Hello everybody, my name is Min and I'm your co-host for today with Rob from Melbourne. And we're from NDIS Property Australia here in Melbourne. And you're listening to the SDA Housing Podcast, a show that explains, highlights, guides and brings awareness about all things SDA in this ever-changing NDIS world. Today we have a special guest speaker. His name is Greg.
Well done.
And Jordan's away at the moment, but Greg is one of the directors of SDA by Project Friday. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Greg, who are you? What do you do? What's this all about here, this thing called SDA by Project Friday?
Project Friday was originally set up as a property development company with a focus on owner-occupier projects. And when working through a number of different avenues to try and deliver some social impact, because property development's a bit of a dirty word these days, we realized that we could actually put a lot of our thought and pillars into an SDA project. Mm-hmm. That's kind of where it all began about 3 years ago when we first discovered what the NDIS was trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of snowballed from there.
So is there a division called SDA by Project Friday, a part of Project Friday?
Correct. So it's still property focused. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that's our bread and butter. That's what we do. Mm-hmm. But we found that SDA was so new that we could really shift the needle, yes, in a sense, yes, and try and deliver something that was superior to, yes, what was currently on the market.
Yes.
So we've spent the last 3 years developing not just essentially the pillars that we stand by and work towards, but innovating a lot in terms of the products that are needed, yeah, to deliver SDA.
We'll get to those pillars in a minute, but Rob and I were at the SDA conference in Melbourne about 3 weeks ago, and we came across your Instagram page, and I was blown away. We're a big fan of what you guys do.
Thank you.
The word bespoke is used very loosely in the property development world. What does bespoke mean to you guys as a SDA developer, architectural firm here?
Well, I guess first and foremost, when we started the journey, we kind of went looking for an architect that didn't really have any history of working in institutional developments or projects. We really wanted to try and achieve something that was truly a residential product, something that was comfortable for our participants. Obviously, function is critical as well, but really looking at the different pinch points in terms of design and aesthetic and seeing where we could move the bar and create something that was truly different to what was out there on the market at the time.
Rob, you and I spoke a lot the last year or 2 years about other small-time, big-time developers, fund managers, sophisticated investors trying to enter this space of small projects like this. And yeah, they don't often get it right at all because they're so driven by, I guess, margins of numbers.
The underlying quality and making it suitable for the participants.
100%.
So Rob, our discussion in the last year or so, what have you come to a realisation? I mean, other than profit margins, that's all, they're just driven by yield. What other mistakes are they doing out there that these guys are not doing? Project Friday are not doing?
Well, I'm sure Greg will tell us exactly what they are doing that's different, but we get the feedback that a lot of the developers are just doing the absolute minimum according to the standards that are in place, and those minimums aren't good enough for the future for participants. And what's going to happen is a lot of the participants may start in an apartment, but eventually they're going to move to a newer, better, bigger, more purpose-built apartment down the track. So you just have to wonder what's going to happen to those smaller apartments that have taken shortcuts. So
Greg, here's a question. Are you guys building to demand as in participant-led, your model?
We are. We look a lot at the current demand that's forecast by the NDIA in terms of areas. But the reality is the product that we are delivering differentiates itself so much that we kind of are also looking at people who are already in existing SDA who may want to move. As a caveat to all this, I have to congratulate everybody who's working in this space because it is very daunting, and the paperwork and rigmarole that comes with running a fund or process like this is exhausting. So whether someone is delivering what we consider to be, the leading SDA type product, or whether some of the product still has flaws in it, I think we still need to unite almost as an industry and, pat ourselves on the back for delving in at this point in time because it is very new. Having said that, when we started out on this process, we were astounded by some of the comments that we would receive from SIL providers. We've met with dozens of SIL providers to look at, what are the needs of people with a disability and how we can best deal with those, especially in an apartment focus, because that's what we do. First and foremost, I guess we just don't accept the fact that participants are forced to share.
So what were the comments are you referring to that they said to you?
Well, we had, we looked at putting a swimming pool in our first development because we thought what a great opportunity for people to be able to enjoy something that others do in their apartment buildings. And a lot of the SIL providers came back and said, oh no, our participants don't like to swim. So, you kind of question what their motivation is for some of the answers that we were getting on some of these questions. Like I mentioned, we were told, try and build so that you can have 2 or 3 participants in an apartment. And I don't think there's another class or category of individuals in this country where we actually force them to share simply because 2 people have a disability. So regardless of that, we focused solely on single occupier apartments. It is challenging in that in the industry at the moment to obtain the correct funding. But I think that if you're going to talk about choice and control, you have to allow people to live on their own, to live with family members, to live with friends, and not simply just group people together because of their disabilities.
Exactly. The renders and imagery on your Instagram and Facebook and your website shows a very wonderful story of what you guys are doing. I don't think I've seen any other organisation in Australia doing what you guys do.
Thank you very much. We've spent a lot of time. The first thing we kind of did was broke down what elements of an apartment still looked very institutional. I should take a step back and say, as Project Friday developers, we were always very clear on anything that we built was something that we would want to live in ourselves.
Exactly.
So we don't use split systems because I don't think it's a healthy, positive environment for any individual to live in. So, we set key pillars that existed with Project Friday. We try and achieve, looked at really, we didn't want it to be lip service. We didn't want the apartments to simply look like hospital rooms. So we started with things like designing our own grab rails because everything on the market was very commercial. So in doing so, we then started to look at nurse call buttons and items that you wouldn't traditionally find on the walls of a residential apartment building. So we've worked a lot in innovating some of these products, making them feel more residential. And that's why our renders strike you as something that is a little bit different to what's in the marketplace. When it comes to things like auto door closers, we don't wait for the NDIA to fund those. We actually put them in from the outset. We try and ensure that our participants can walk into an apartment and require minimal additional work. So we've tried to cover off a broad range of items, things like hoist provisions.
Yes.
We don't just do the provision. We actually recess the tracks into the ceiling so that aesthetically, when you walk into an apartment, it looks no different to an apartment that you or I would.
Exactly. My advice to anyone listening on our podcast is, we're throwing a lot of jargon, technical jargon at the moment. It's hard for someone to understand what we're talking about with all these acronyms, right? But it's hard for an individual investor to look at a floor plan and know exactly what it is. And a render and animation is a good guide. But if you can see that renders of the dwelling, and it looks and feels like a luxury build, a hotel, something unique, that is what you should be aiming for as a SDA bespoke product.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Without question. And our pillars kind of extend past the design.
Yep.
So we look at locations that have an 80 plus walk score, for example. So we want our participants to be right in the heart of it, right in the thick of it. I don't understand why you would build SDA in areas where you are not surrounded by community, where you're not surrounded by amenity, where you don't have a train station close by and a supermarket. We want them to feel independent as much as they possibly can.
Yes.
And our apartments are designed, in fact, the whole building is designed from the ground up in order to allow them to move freely through all the spaces.
Yes.
We ensure that even doors to the bin rooms have auto closers in them so that our participants can take their own rubbish down. They're not reliant on a sill for all of their day-to-day activities.
Yes. Are the features in the apartments, are they height adjustable, mechanical, like wardrobes and
of course,
cupboards and everything else?
Of course. Our kitchen is height adjustable, and it's not just our prep space, but also our cooking space is height adjustable. Our bathrooms are really interesting because we couldn't find a sink that we thought justified what it was we were trying to build. So we designed and created our own Korean sinks that are obviously height adjustable as well and still tick the aesthetic that Claire Cousins Architects were adamant that we stick to. There's a whole range of things.
Wardrobe, height adjustable?
Wardrobes, we do height adjustable hanging rails, so you can actually move the hanging rail higher or lower. Obviously, we try and use drawers wherever we can because drawers are the easiest to use for everybody.
Yes.
Not just for people with a disability.
Yes.
We kind of don't focus so much on the disability side of the design. Of course, we have to comply with SDA design guidelines, but it's no different to the way you or I would want to function in an apartment.
So the pillars, can you name all the pillars and then?
There's 9 of them.
Nine, yes.
So obviously, first and foremost is location. We also work to ensure that each building and the number of participants are mixed.
Yes.
So we don't only build to high physical support. I think people who are building solely for high physical support are looking simply at the yield at the end of the day.
So you will have an IL apartment in the building?
We're trying to incorporate IL as well. Just at the moment, it's FA and high physical.
Yes.
All of our apartments are designed to high physical.
Yes.
But no, we look at a broad mix of people. The reason that we do that is we want, as part of every building, we try and build in a vocational program, which is also one of our pillars. So, for example, in our first building in Carnegie, there is a horticulture program that can be used on a therapeutic basis, but at the same time, thanks to our partners at Kevin Hines Grow, our participants are actually able to work and earn an income to supplement their disability support pension.
So Carnegie?
Yes.
Just started construction?
Probably 2 months from completion.
Wow. What's in there? How many levels, how many apartments?
It's a 4-level apartment building. There's a total of 15 single occupancy apartments. Some of them are 2-bedders, some of them are 1-bedders. There's a mix. We have communal spaces, the same way as you would in any high-end residential development today. We have private dining room spaces where you can book that out if you want to have a birthday party or if you want to have a dinner. Many of us are living in smaller apartments today, and it's practically impossible to fit 12 people in for dinner.
Yes.
We have a sensory garden where you can sit.
Is that rooftop?
No, that's on the ground.
Yes.
More in a solitude type of way, more for a reflective space. God, just put me on the spot.
How many OOA rooms are there?
We have 2 OOA rooms.
Yes.
We try and we do that so that we're not because we're not linked to a sill provider, and we want choice and control. We don't mind the number of sills that we have working throughout the building.
Yes.
So even when we went to design those OOA rooms, we actually sat with sill providers and said, well, what is it that you need in order to serve our participants better?
Yep.
Because often those things are kind of put to the side and the room is quite simple and basic. But I think we can all agree that if you have a sill that is comfortable in their work environment and supported in their work environment, that in turn they will actually assist the participant better.
Speaking of sills, Rob, we've had our fair share of interaction with sills.
Yes.
Without naming names, what's your opinion of a sill business and their workload and their desire to be part of SDA? Well, what's your impression of a sill provider these days in the market at the moment in Melbourne?
I think sill providers are rapidly growing, and it's a very attractive business model for them. The issue we find is that they're so busy that it is hard to maintain contact and have a regular dialogue with them, so that can be frustrating. But they are growing rapidly into a number of different areas in the market.
So back to you, Greg. Do you have a sill allocated to this project?
We do. We have an agreement with a sill that we feel was best representative of what we were trying to deliver.
Yep. And being 2 months away from completion, how is the progress of filling up the 15 units?
Well, we're getting a massive amount of inquiries, if you can appreciate, which is fantastic. The reality is that a lot of the people that we are having applied don't yet have the appropriate funding.
Yep.
That's the most difficult part for me, is that I need to send them back to the NDIA to try and amend their plan. And unfortunately, at the moment, I think, and I'm hoping that will change with time, there aren't enough people who have the choice to live on their own.
So how many of the applicants via this sill service, how many of them actually do have SDA funding?
A lot of them do have SDA funding, but not the right level. So a lot of them are funded to share with 2 other participants or 3 other participants.
But they want their own privacy,
They want their own space. They want their own privacy. I had just an application this morning, which I was shocked about, where a gentleman wants to live with his wife, and yet his funding is only to share a house with 3 other people. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure of any wife, for example, who would be happy to live in an environment like that, and nor the husband. I mean, I just don't think that at the moment the funding is correct.
Of course. Yeah.
We haven't wavered from our vision, despite what we're seeing in the market, because we do believe that over time that will change, particularly given the ability to have shared support, which the most recent NDIS document that I was reading, they have come to an understanding that you can spend a little bit more on your SDA, but the reality is that your sill costs will actually come down.
Exactly.
Because at the moment they are not appropriately weighted.
Yes. So that's Carnegie.
Yes.
Altona
is a really great one. I mean, when we first purchased the site, I was just in love with the area. It's such a great little community spot. We're about 300 metres away from the beach.
So where is I don't know Altona.
Altona is just on the other side of the West Gate.
Yep. Which is where?
Not from...
Okay.
In the west.
Olden, probably 15 kilometres from the city, just near Williamstown.
Yep. Near the beach.
Beautiful spot, right on the water.
Oh, wow.
What we didn't realise was that the council in Altona were actually working to make Altona Beach the first fully accessible beach in Australia. So kudos to them.
Yes.
Obviously, greatly helps our cause. Altona it's a beautiful little spot. It's a real community feel. There's a great vibe on the street, and that's what we look for when we pick our location.
It's very much gentrified. It's similar to Williamstown and Spotswood. 30 years ago, probably very working class. Now becoming more hip. A lot of cafes, restaurants. It's good dog beaches in Altona too.
So DA construction, where are we at with the...
We are breaking ground in 4 weeks' time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's going to be our second
15 units too?
Yes, same model. This one, actually, what's really interesting about Altona is, again, in search of a vocational program to work in that area. We actually thought hospitality was a great one to look at. We've designed on the ground floor a cafe that can be managed and run by our participants. Sounds simple, but is actually incredibly complicated because your DDA compliance is actually reversed. So your cooking and kitchen spaces need to be DDA compliant, as well as the actual space for customers to sit. In Altona, we're also producing our own honey on the rooftop that we hope they'll be able to sell in the cafe. The idea is really to create better lives for a lot of these individuals. Not everyone is forced to work. Some people will choose to, some people will choose not to. But the fact that it's integrated into our space means that you don't have issues with transport. You don't have, all the issues that would come for people with disabilities to go out and find work, find employment.
Yes.
So that's been a really big focus of ours. It's more than housing. We look at it in a real holistic approach in terms of what we can do to help our participants.
That's wonderful. So just like the Avengers movies, there's an end game. What's this end game here for this business?
Well, we certainly are not interested in selling our buildings. It's real vertical integration from design through construction through to managing the buildings. That's why we are NDIS registered, because we didn't want to just build something and then hand it over on a head lease.
Yes.
Kind of doesn't feel like the right move. So despite the rigmarole that comes with running your own SDA building, that's really our focus. We're in it for the long term. We're in it to try and make a difference in this industry.
How many projects will you roll out the next few years, do you think?
We are looking at a first tranche of 5 buildings.
Yep.
It's difficult to find the right spots. Land values are not helping. Cost of living pressures are not helping. Construction costs are not helping.
You mentioned earlier the word Bendigo.
Yes.
What was out there?
Yeah, we are looking at a number of different areas in country Victoria.
Yes.
Again, same principle in terms of close to amenity, but we feel that those areas, Bendigo, Ballarat, Werribee is going to be site number 3. We find that, they are lagging drastically behind inner city Melbourne. And again, we're not looking necessarily for large demand in the area. What we're looking at is to change the nature of what's being delivered in the area.
Rob, my question to you is, again, this is not a knock on this model here at SDA on Project Friday, but talking to other sales and housing providers around Australia, there's more challenges in getting funding for participants in the regional areas because, you don't drive to a country town and expect to see an apartment complex for SDA participants there. Have you guys done your research with providers and the Commission, the NDIA, whether it will be more challenging for you to find participants with funding in those regional areas? Is that a risk there for your business?
Look, I think that the participants exist. I think the reality and the nature of the beast when you're in construction is that you need to find the right balance in terms of cost base.
But you will agree that the funding for apartment living for participants is easier to achieve in the metro areas than the regional areas.
It is. If you look at the locations in regional Victoria where we're trying to build, and when you're right in the heart of the city, apartments are popping up more and more.
Yes.
That's the nature of development, in those sorts of locations.
Yeah.
Obviously, we'll take more time to fill the buildings out there.
Yes.
But that's fine with us.
Yes.
We're in this for the long term.
So, Rob, we just got to build houses next door to the complex just so we take a rejection to our houses, right? I'm only kidding. So, you buy, develop, hold as a business model. 5 in the first tranche. How many tranches will there be? Is there a fund manager behind you? What's the model there?
Well, we partnered. I have to say that investing in SDA is not a mum and dad investment. you really need to understand the complexities of the model. It takes a lot of funding. It's not as simple and clear cut to go and borrow from one of the big four banks, whilst they are working very hard to get into the space.
Yes.
Funding is difficult for any normal development, even when it's something that you're going to sell.
Yes.
So we've partnered with a family office. They're looking at social impact, which is really important. And again, it's a process. It's a journey.
I personally believe Victoria will be the biggest state for NDIS SDA in long term. The numbers are just there warranted. Sydney is hard because it's just all built out and there's nowhere to expand, whereas Victoria is that capability there. The numbers are huge. There's 1.3 million in Victoria that are disabled, and they're slowly drifting into the NDIS as well. So kudos to you guys. I mean, if you guys are going, regional as well in Victoria, that's going to be great for you guys to get your footprint out there, because the market needs more of your product. And I know there's only so much you can do with. You don't have unlimited money, obviously, right? So you got to pick and choose your battles and go for gold there wherever you can. Yeah.
Oh, look, absolutely. You need to walk before you run. We're trying to prove that the model works and the model is sustainable for the NDIA as well, because the reality is that the NDIS is going to be costing a staggering amount of money to the state and to the federal government. I think that's going to be. I think we haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg.
Exactly.
To be honest with you. I mean, on one of your recent podcasts, you talked about projections for SDA now reaching 50,000 people nationwide. That's why I say that, we need to unite at this point as an industry and certainly push everyone to be delivering not just apartments, but houses or whatever it is that you choose to be building at this point in time is greatly helping the cause, because I believe at last count, we're at 2,500 apartments across the nation, and that's nowhere near what we're going to need in the long term.
Just on construction, where do you see it heading with the construction companies and the difficulties they're facing at the minute with costs and the blowouts? I mention that because the stats came out this morning that 47% of all planned construction projects in Melbourne have been shelved over the last three months. Because of obviously not being viable from a costing point of view. Those pressures exist for you as well?
We talk about inflationary rates at, 6 and 7%, and that might be an across-the-board figure, but I can assure you the construction, the cost increases that we faced are skyrocketing. It's actually outrageous what's going on. I'm hoping that it kind of settles down. But the reality is, again, the only difference that makes at the end of the day is if you're chasing these unattainable double-digit returns, then sure, you do need to shelve these projects. But if you're looking at it with a more long-term view and a long-term goal, then yes, undoubtedly the construction costs have increased. If you ask me, I would say it's circa 20% across the board in the construction industry. Whether or not that settles down once product becomes more easily available. At the moment, we're facing shortages on timber, steel prices are astronomical. The cost of living pressure is what is driving a lot of subcontractors to increase their prices. Demand, because of all of the infrastructure that we're building in Victoria. I mean, good luck getting a load of concrete today. It's all going to the tunnels. So all of those things obviously don't help. But we have a vision and we're pushing forward.
Greg, what are the numbers for costs? What's your prediction? Because in Brisbane, we've seen apartment construction of SDA go from 2,500 square metre for a 15-pack to 4,000 square metre now. What are the numbers in Melbourne at the moment? 2 years ago and now, and where do you think it will go to?
Well, I mean, 2,500 a square metre hasn't been a number that we've seen in Melbourne for the better part probably of, the decade.
Yes.
Our costs sort of started around 4,000 a metre. They're probably pushing closer to 5 now in pure construction costs. What you have to remember is construction is only one line item out of several dozen in a development process. All of those line items are increasing. The costs of, especially if you want to use a good architect, if you want to innovate the product, all of these things we're seeing increased pressures cost-wise. But again, we're trying to amortize those costs, a lot of the development costs across a number of buildings.
Yep.
So the learnings that we make in the first building, we're applying to the second building. We're certainly not resting on our laurels and accepting the design of the first building across all 5. With every building, we are looking to innovate. With every building, we are looking at change. We are looking to see what works and what doesn't in an apartment. It's a steep learning curve with SDA.
So if you're nudging 5,000 square metre now and there's no indication when costs will settle or costs will pull back at all, sure there's a point of no further entry. Like if it's hitting 6,000 or 7,000, surely the feasibility has to reach a limit where you cannot go any further. Is that number there? Is that a possibility for your organisation in this SDA world if those numbers get too high in the coming year or 2 years?
Look, at the end of the day, we can only deal with what is current. You can't predict what's going to happen in the future. Undoubtedly, as you say, with 50% of projects being shelved, all of the parties involved, from the builder to the subcontractor to the supplier, are going to have to come to the party at some point. The costs can't continue to rise in the same manner. Having said that, look at land prices. I mean, 10 years ago when we were paying $200,000 a lot for an apartment in terms of land price, everyone said that was unstable. It couldn't go any further. It couldn't increase. And today you're paying $300,000 a land lot for an apartment. And everyone's saying the same thing. So, you know, the property market in this country is cyclical. The cycle goes just long enough for everybody to forget that it drops as well as rises. And so we obviously are looking for opportunities in the market when that happens. But no, I don't think that we'll see the same rapid increases that we have over the last few years continue. It will hopefully settle down.
Greg, any final words of advice from you as an representing the organisation here to anyone else around Australia who's thinking about stepping into the whole project delivery of such product like yours? Words of advice from your learned experiences the last 3 years.
Look, I think the most important thing is really to do your research, do your homework. We were, 2 years before we even purchased a site. That's going to be the key. But like I said, demand and supply is nowhere near balanced yet. So the important thing is that we're delivering product to the market. The reality is that if you don't innovate, that if you don't create something that's got good design, that if you don't work and hear what the participants and the SIL providers and all the other peripheral organizations, support coordinators, what they're looking for and what they need, you're going to struggle.
Yes.
That's the reality.
Rob, do you have any words of advice for Greg?
No, it sounds like Greg's very experienced in the sector, and if you've been looking at it for at least 5 years, you've certainly learnt a lot and know where it's heading, and everything you've said rings true with everything that we hear about out in the marketplace ourselves. So well done.
Thank you very much.
We're a big fan of what we do, mate.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. We'll look forward to hopefully inviting Jordan next time to a battle of a debate versus House SDA versus Apartment SDA.
That's an excellent idea.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye. Cheers.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure you are subscribed and following us so you can keep in the loop with all of our upcoming episodes. We would really appreciate it if you could leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and to share this podcast with those that could benefit. Until next time, catch you on the next episode.